Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room hummed with voices, men in pressed uniforms leaning over the map projected on the wall. Lines of red and blue traced across a landscape that looked more like scars than rivers. The chatter was clipped, decisive, practiced. Orders were given, notes scribbled, assignments locked in. And yet her chair remained just outside the circle. Her fingers tapped once on the notepad in front of her, not from nerves, from rhythm, from the steady beat of someone who'd been waiting far too long to be heard. She raised her eyes once toward the colonel. He never looked back. It was easier for them that way. Pretend she was just another shadow in the room. Pretend her record didn't matter. Pretend the silence she carried wasn't heavier than the rifles on their backs. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. A secret buried so deep it sometimes startled her awake at night. The kind of truth that burned behind her ribs every time she strapped her boots. She wondered if tonight this mission would force it out of her. The colonel's voice cut through. Insertion window is 0300, 4 clicks north of the border. You've got one shot. One shot. The words rang in her head, longer than they should have. She leaned back, chair creaking under her. The light overhead buzzed faintly. She thought about speaking, thought about the weight of interrupting men who already made up their minds. But she didn't. She never did. Silence had become her weapon, and silence was safer. But outside the window, rain tapped against the glass like impatient fingers. And in that rain, in that gray reflection, she saw her own eyes staring back, tired, determined, refusing to break. She stood alone after the meeting, watching the others file out, their boots thudding across the concrete. Someone laughed. Someone cursed under his breath. Someone checked a photo in his pocket, the face of a child he hoped to see again. None of them looked her way. Fine. She didn't need them. She never really had. She adjusted the strap of her pack and stepped into the hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered once, then steadied. The corridor smelled of damp paint, of machinery oil, of a building too old to care about comfort. A soldier brushed past her, muttering, "Watch it." She didn't answer, she kept walking. And as she moved, her mind carried her somewhere else, years back into a memory she rarely let surface. It was dusk. A younger version of her stood in a field outside a house that no longer stood. Smoke curled into the sky. The air smelled of ash, of endings. And on the ground, knees pressed into the dirt, she held the only family she had left. A brother barely 16, his uniform too big for his frame, his voice shaking as he whispered, don't let them win." The last words he ever spoke. She blinked, forcing the image away. Not now, not here. The mission required her. The past could wait. But the past never really waits. It lingers, it stains. The hangar doors groaned open. Cold night air swept in, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth. The team was already gathering near the transport. Engines rumbled low, steady, almost like a heartbeat. She checked her gear in silence. The rifle, the scope, the small folded letter tucked deep inside her chest pocket. No one knew about that letter. No one ever would. Her squad leader, Ramirez, caught her eye for a brief second. He hesitated, then looked away. It wasn't dislike, it wasn't doubt, it was something else, something heavier. He knew she had a habit of surviving missions others didn't, and for some men, that was harder to forgive than failure. She climbed aboard, boots clanging against metal. The air inside the transport was thick with sweat, grease, and the nervous silence of soldiers pretending not to be afraid. Someone cracked a joke, forced laughter. Another soldier pulled out a silver chain, lips moving in prayer. She sat against the wall, hands steady, heartbeat calm. Outwardly she was stone, inwardly a storm. Every mission carried the weight of two battles, the one outside and the one inside. Tonight both felt equally dangerous. The engines roared. The transport lifted, shuddering against the rain. Through the small window, darkness stretched endlessly, broken only by lightning on the horizon. The sound filled her ears, rotors chopping the night, rain pelting against steel. It was almost enough to drown out her thoughts. Almost. Her eyes closed for a moment, and in the dark she whispered, not loud enough for anyone else to hear, "I'll finish what you started." No one asked who she was speaking to. No one dared. The flight dragged on in tense silence, the kind that gnawed at the edges of courage. She felt the weight of eyes glance at her, then look away. She was used to it. Used to being the outlier, the anomaly, the one they never fully trusted even when she saved them. The clock in her head ticked down. The closer they got, the sharper everything became, the smell of oil, the rattle of gear, the tension in her jaw. Her mind traced the terrain she'd memorized, the ridge, the compound, the narrow windows of opportunity. But there was one detail she hadn't shared with them, one she couldn't. Because if they knew why this mission mattered to her, if they knew what she was really looking for out there, they might pull her from it. And she couldn't let that happen. Not this time. The green light blinked. The jumpmaster's voice barked, 2 minutes. Her pulse steadied, her breathing slowed. She stood, strapped her pack tighter, checked her rifle one last time. The door opened, wind tearing through, rain lashing in. Below, the ground was a blur of shadows and lightning strikes. Go! One by one, the soldiers disappeared into the storm. She stepped forward. For a moment she paused at the edge. The cold wind whipped across her face, stinging her eyes. And then she let go. The world swallowed her whole. Falling. The scream of air rushing past her ears. The sting of rain slashing her skin. The faint glow of tracer fire in the distance, like lightning born of men instead of clouds. She counted, controlled, released her chute. The snap jolted her body, harness biting into her shoulders. She swung once, steadied. The ground below rushed closer, dark and hostile. She landed hard, rolled, came up crouching, rifle ready. Around her, shadows of teammates hit the ground one by one. Some cursed, some groaned. One's chute tangled in a tree. She filed the sound away, knew she'd have to help him later. For now, her eyes scanned the horizon. The compound's faint outline loomed in the distance. Lights flickered. Men with weapons moved like ants around its perimeter. She exhaled, low and steady. This was it. But as she adjusted her scope, something caught her eye. A symbol, painted faintly on the wall of the compound, almost hidden beneath grime and shadows. She froze, her chest tightened. It was impossible. And yet there it was. The same symbol she had once seen on the sleeve of the men who burned her home to the ground. Her fingers tightened on the rifle. This wasn't just another mission. It never had been. And if she was right, if that symbol meant what she thought it meant, then tonight wasn't about orders. It was about something far more dangerous. The rain poured harder. Her team whispered across the comms, planning their approach. She listened, answered when needed, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She could almost hear her brother's voice again, his last words, his plea. And for the first time in years, she felt her silence begin to crack. Not out loud, not yet. But inside, where the war had always been waiting. She lay flat against the mud, rain crawling across her skin like cold fingers. The world around her was black and trembling with distant thunder, broken only by the faint orange glow of floodlights guarding the compound. Her breath slowed. Her scope adjusted. Her finger hovered, not over the trigger, but over memory. Why did that symbol still exist here years later? Why tonight? Why now? She hadn't told them. She couldn't. To the others, this was just another high-value target, another operation drawn up by men in offices miles away. To her, it was a thread pulled straight from the fire that destroyed her past. And if she tugged it, everything might unravel. Team Alpha, move on my mark. Ramirez's voice cracked through the comms, calm, controlled. She whispered back, "Copy." The word tasted bitter. She was part of their language, their commands, but never their trust. A shadow moved near her, Jensen. Too young, too eager, still carrying the weight of proving himself. His hands trembled as he checked his weapon. In the faint glow, she noticed his lips moving silently. A prayer, or maybe a promise. She wondered who waited for him at home, if anyone. The seconds bled out slow. Then move. The squad crept forward, low and deliberate, each step swallowed by rain. Boots sank into mud, gear scraped against branches, breaths puffed white into the night. Her heart kept an even beat, not calm, not panic, something else. Resolve. The compound's walls loomed larger. Rust streaked the concrete. A guard yawned near a tower, rifle slung carelessly, unaware of what stalked in the dark. She shifted her scope, one breath, one squeeze. The guard dropped soundlessly, rain washing blood into shadow. "Clean," Ramirez muttered. No praise, no hesitation, just acknowledgement. The team moved in closer. They reached the outer wall. Ramirez raised a fist, "Halt." The squad froze, breaths caught midair. The hum of a generator filled the silence, steady and oblivious. Somewhere deeper inside, voices barked in a language half the squad couldn't understand. She could. She never told them that either. Because if they knew how much she knew, they'd ask why. And she wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. Ramirez pointed toward the breach point. Metal doors reinforced, locked tight, explosives ready. But before the charge could be set, a sound slipped through the night. Laughter. Not the cruel kind, not mocking, something else. She turned her head. Beyond the wall, through a crack in the concrete, she glimpsed two guards leaning under a half-roof, sharing a cigarette. One spoke, the other chuckled, shaking his head like men sharing a story too ordinary for war. For a moment, just a moment, they looked human. Not enemies, not targets, just men trying to survive another night. She felt her chest tighten. She pushed it down. Survival didn't erase guilt. Humanity didn't absolve cruelty. And symbols painted on walls carried debts that could never be forgiven. She gave the signal. The explosion cracked the silence apart. Smoke and fire chewed the night. Alarms screamed. Voices erupted. The team poured in. Bullets tore the air. Sparks lit the dark. The storm inside matched the storm outside, chaos devouring order in every direction. She moved like shadow, rifle steady, eyes cold. Her shots found their marks. Each target fell, faceless in the rush. But her mind wasn't faceless. Her mind had burned that symbol into memory long before tonight. Through smoke she saw him. Not the target, not the commander they'd been sent for. Someone else. Older now, scars lining his cheek, but unmistakable. The man who had stood in the field that night. The man who watched her world burn and smiled. Her chest caught fire, her hands shook. For the first time in years, her breath faltered. It was him. The reason silence had become her armor. The reason grief had never left. And he was standing 20 yards away, shouting orders, unaware of the eyes locked on him. "Cover left flank," Ramirez's voice cut through. But she didn't move. Not yet. Jensen stumbled beside her, bullets sparking off the wall near his head. She grabbed his collar, yanked him down just before a round could end him. He gasped, eyes wide, "Thanks." She nodded once, cold, detached, but inside something cracked. She wasn't just here for orders, she was here for blood. The man turned, retreating deeper into the compound. She followed. The corridors inside stank of diesel, sweat, and iron. Echoes of footsteps, shouts, the clatter of rifles against steel. Her squad split, each chasing different paths. She peeled off alone. Her boots slapped against wet concrete, shadows dancing under flickering lights. Each step closer to him, each step further from them. Her calm crackled, Ramirez demanding position. She ignored it. The hallway narrowed. A door slammed ahead. She knew it was him. Her fingers brushed the folded letter in her pocket, the one she never read anymore, the one written by hands no longer alive. Don't let them win. The words bled through her memory, her brother's voice, his plea. And tonight, finally, she had the chance. She burst through the door. The room inside was dim, cluttered with crates, maps, radios buzzing faintly. And there he was, rifle raised, eyes narrowing the instant they met hers. Recognition struck him too. The storm outside roared louder, lightning flashing through a broken window, framing him in jagged white light. She aimed, he fired first. The bullet grazed her shoulder, ripping fabric, burning flesh. She didn't flinch. Her shot tore through his leg, dropping him to one knee. His rifle clattered across the floor. For a second, just a second, the war paused. The rain outside softened, the silence pressed in. And she saw him not as a soldier, not as a target, but as the ghost of every nightmare she'd carried since that night. Her hands trembled, her finger curled tighter on the trigger. Finish it, her brother's voice whispered inside her. But then another voice. A living one. Ma'am. Jensen, he had followed her in. His chest heaved, eyes darting from her to the man bleeding on the floor. Orders were extraction, Jensen hissed. We don't have time. Her heart pounded, her sight blurred. Orders, revenge, silence, memory. She could feel the choice crushing her. Kill him and lose the mission. Spare him and lose herself. Her breath shook, her body froze. And in that moment of hesitation, the man laughed. Low, bitter, broken. You look just like him, he rasped in her language. Her blood ran cold. Jensen didn't understand. He looked between them, confused, desperate. Who is he? Jensen asked. She didn't answer, she couldn't. The man's words hung in the air like smoke. Just like him. Her brother. The compound rattled with gunfire again. The squad was calling for retreat, explosives ticking down. She stood there, rain dripping from her hair, rifle locked on a man who should have died years ago. Jensen grabbed her arm. We have to go. Her silence pressed harder than any shout. Her spirit stood taller than the enemies around her, but pain bent her to her knees inside. What mattered more, revenge or survival? The clock was running out. She had to choose. Her finger trembled against the trigger. Rainwater dripped from her sleeve, pooling on the concrete floor beneath her boots. The man's breathing rasped, uneven, guttural from pain. Jensen's hand tightened on her arm. Now we have to move. The voice in her head, her brother's voice, pleaded, don't let them win. But what was winning? Killing him here like an execution, or leaving him, letting justice be decided by someone else, if justice even existed anymore. Her silence stretched, her chest burned, her spirit felt taller, yet her knees wanted to give in. The man spat blood and forced a crooked smile. His eyes, dark and cruel, flicked up at her. You're weaker than he was. Her grip snapped tight. But Jensen yanked her harder. We don't have time. In the distance, an explosion tore through the compound. Walls shook, dust rained from the ceiling. The floor itself seemed to groan. And she let go. Not of the rifle, but of the choice. She lowered the weapon. The man's laughter cracked the silence again, bitter, sharp like nails against glass. Jensen shoved her toward the door. Move. She obeyed, barely. Each step backward carved guilt into her chest like a blade. But when the door slammed behind them, she wasn't sure if she had just spared her enemy or betrayed herself. The corridors twisted with chaos. Smoke blinded, alarms wailed, footsteps pounded from all directions. Jensen took point, his youth clashing with urgency. She followed, body rigid, every nerve burning with the decision she'd just made. A voice broke through the comms, Ramirez shouting, "Extraction point now." They sprinted, turned a corner. The world became a blur of gunfire and shadows. A soldier lunged from the smoke. Jensen fired too late. She shoved him aside, squeezed her trigger. The man dropped. Jensen looked at her, stunned. She didn't return the look, she just kept moving. Outside, rain hammered harder, mixing with the acrid sting of smoke. The squad was already converging near the breach. Some limped, some bled. One carried another on his back, face twisted in silent determination. "Move, move, birds inbound," Ramirez barked, waving them toward the open field beyond the wall. The night lit up with tracer fire. Bullets hissed past like angry sparks. She dropped low, sprinting across the mud. The weight of silence clamped on her chest. Jensen stumbled again. She grabbed his vest, dragged him upright, forcing him forward until they reached the others. Engines roared overhead. The extraction choppers cut through the rain, their searchlights carving harsh beams across the field. "Go!" The squad poured in, pulling each other up, hands frantic, bodies heaving. She shoved Jensen into the bird, then climbed aboard herself, boots slick with mud. The hatch slammed shut. The roar of rotors drowned everything. Inside, the squad was a mess of gasps, curses, and blood. One soldier cried out for a medic. Another slumped silent, his eyes glassy, already too far gone. Ramirez barked orders no one fully heard. His voice was more for control than clarity. Jensen sat opposite her, chest heaving, eyes fixed on her face. He wanted to ask, she could see it. He wanted to know why she froze, why she didn't finish it, who that man was. But he didn't ask, not yet. Instead, he whispered, "You saved me." She stared back, no words, only silence. Because deep inside, she knew she hadn't saved him at all. She'd just borrowed his time. The flight home stretched like a wound that wouldn't close. Rain smeared the windows, blurring the lights of distant villages below. Inside, silence spread heavy, broken only by the hum of the engines and the occasional cough or groan of the wounded. She leaned back against the cold metal wall, her shoulder aching where the bullet had grazed. Blood seeped slow, sticky under her uniform. Her hand drifted, almost unconsciously, to the folded letter in her pocket. She didn't pull it out. She never did. Just feeling its edges was enough to remind her why she was here. But tonight, that reminder cut deeper than ever. Because the man still lived. And he had seen her. Recognition had passed between them like lightning. Which meant her silence wasn't safe anymore. Back at base, the debrief was chaos. Reports clashed, numbers blurred, names listed under KIA felt heavier than ink could carry. Ramirez stood at the front, voice gravel rough, trying to hold it together. Mission compromised, secondary target neutralized, primary incomplete. Incomplete. The word felt like a knife twisting in her stomach. But no one said her name, no one pointed at her. And maybe that was worse. To be invisible in failure carried a weight silence couldn't shield. Hours later, she sat alone outside the hangar, rain dripping from the edge of the roof above, forming puddles at her boots. The night was cold, sharp, alive with distant thunder. She lit a cigarette, her first in months. The smoke curled, bitter against her throat. Footsteps approached, she didn't look up. Jensen sat beside her, shivering in his damp uniform. His hands fidgeted, restless, young. "You knew him," he said quietly. Not a question, a statement. She inhaled, exhaled, let the smoke bleed into the night. Jensen turned to her. His eyes were wide, raw, searching. Who was he? Her silence stretched. She thought about telling him, about letting someone else carry even a sliver of what she held. But the words tangled in her chest. Instead, she whispered, "Someone who should have been dead." Jensen's throat bobbed as he swallowed. He didn't press further, not yet. The rain thickened. The night deepened, and between them silence lingered, louder than any answer. When she finally stood, the cigarette burned down to her fingers. She felt the ache in her knees, the weight in her chest. She thought about her brother again, about that night in the field, and about the promise she'd made, silent but binding. She hadn't kept it tonight. Not fully. But maybe tomorrow. The next morning, orders came down. The mission wasn't over. The man she had spared was no ghost. Intelligence confirmed his survival. His name surfaced again, sharper than before, tied to new coordinates, new movements. The colonel delivered it cold, eyes scanning past her as though she were air. Target re-identified, priority 1. Her chest tightened. This was her chance, her second shot. But also her curse. Because everyone else thought this was just an assignment. Only she knew it was personal. As she packed her gear again, her hands steady but her mind frayed, Jensen caught her eye. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. His look said enough, I saw you, I know there's more. And she realized, her silence wasn't impenetrable anymore. It was cracking. And soon it would have to break. Why did the new orders feel heavier than the last? She laid her gear on the cot one piece at a time. The rifle, the scope, the knife. Each item lined neatly, precision masking the turbulence in her chest. The others treated this like routine. Another mission, another target. They laughed in the barracks, swapped stories about the ones that got away, the ones they'd bagged. But to her, it wasn't routine. It was personal. And personal was dangerous. The colonel's voice still echoed in her ears. Priority 1. Priority for the mission. Priority for her soul. Jensen lingered in the doorway. He hadn't spoken to anyone else about what he saw back at the compound, but the way he stood there, half in shadow, half in light, said everything. You're not telling them, he said softly. Her hands stilled on the strap she was tightening. Not telling them what? That you knew him. Silence stretched. She looked at him finally. His eyes were raw, too young for the war painted in them now. You don't know what you saw, she murmured. But even as she said it, she knew he did. He had seen hesitation. He had seen recognition. And soldiers didn't hesitate unless there was a reason. Jensen shifted, uneasy. If this is personal, it could get us all killed. She tightened the strap until the leather squealed. Then don't make it personal. He wanted to argue. She saw it in the flicker of his jaw, the way his hand flexed at his side. But he didn't. Instead, he left her there, alone with silence again. Night fell heavy and wet when the team moved out. The rain hadn't stopped in days, as though the sky itself wanted to wash the earth clean of men and their wars. Their boots sank in mud, packs heavy with steel and secrets. They moved in convoy, engines rumbling low, headlights dimmed. Inside the vehicle, breath fogged the glass. The smell of oil and damp wool clung to the air. No one spoke. But she could feel Jensen's gaze on her, quiet, watchful, waiting for her to break. Her fingers brushed the folded letter in her pocket again. A reflex, a ritual, a reminder. Don't let them win. The words didn't fade, they only grew louder. The target's new location lay in a valley, tucked beneath jagged cliffs, guarded by men who had no fear of dying. The terrain was a trap waiting to be sprung. The colonel's orders were clear: capture if possible, kill if not. She clenched her jaw. Capture. Could she do that? Could she let him breathe one more day if she had him in her sight? The question gnawed at her as they dismounted, as they spread out through the dripping trees, as the valley's shadows swallowed them whole. Every twig snap echoed like thunder in her ears. Every flash of lightning revealed faces too sharp, too close. And still, her mind was not on the mission. It was on the fire years ago, on the field, on the sound of her brother's last breath. The squad settled into position. She lay prone on the ridge, scope trained down on the compound below. Through her lens, the world sharpened. Details etched themselves into her vision. The rust on the gate, the mud streaks on a truck, the nervous twitch of a guard's hand. And then him. Closer now, standing under a flickering floodlight, limping slightly from the wound she'd given him. His face was worn, older than she remembered, but it was him. Her chest constricted. She had him in her sights. One pull, one breath, and the war inside her would end. Her finger hovered. But Ramirez's voice crackled in her ear. Hold, wait for the breach team. Her breath hitched. Wait. She couldn't, not again. But she did. Because breaking silence was one thing. Breaking orders was another war altogether. The breach went loud. Explosions rolled like thunder down the valley. Floodlights burst. Gunfire erupted. The air became a storm of screams and lead. She shifted her aim, covering the squad as they surged forward. Each shot she took was precise, clinical, but her mind throbbed with every glimpse of him still standing. He was retreating again, slipping through the chaos, vanishing into smoke like he had before. Not this time. She broke from her perch, sliding down the ridge, mud soaking her uniform, rifle clutched tight. Ramirez shouted in her ear. She ignored it. Her boots slammed through puddles, lungs burning, heart pounding like war drums. And then she saw him. He turned down a narrow passage, limping fast. She chased. The corridor stank of fuel and rot. The walls sweated with damp. Her footsteps splashed, echoing. She caught him in her scope again, close, too close. Stop, she shouted, voice breaking the silence she had carried for years. He froze. Slowly he turned, hands raised just enough to show he wasn't holding a weapon. His face glistened with sweat, eyes burning with something between recognition and disdain. You, he said. His voice was lower, raspier than she remembered. The girl from the fire. Her heart stopped. The sound of rain outside vanished. The sound of war behind her faded. It was just him, and her, and the weight of everything between them. Her rifle didn't waver, but her soul did. You killed him, she whispered. The words tore from her throat raw, jagged, as if they'd been waiting years to escape. He tilted his head as if searching her face for the boy he remembered. Your brother was brave, he muttered, but bravery dies fast. Her chest burned, her finger tightened. And then Jensen's voice. Behind her. Don't. She didn't turn. Her eyes stayed locked on the man. Jensen's voice shook, desperate. If you do this, it's not the mission anymore, it's you. And if it's you, we all pay. Her throat clenched. The man smirked. You don't have it in you. Her silence trembled. Her spirit roared. She wanted to pull the trigger. She wanted to end it. But Jensen's hand pressed gently on her shoulder. And for the first time, she felt the weight of someone trying to carry a piece of her burden. Her knees threatened to give. Pain bent her down inside. But her spirit stood taller than the enemies around her. And instead of firing, she exhaled, lowered the rifle, and whispered, "Take him." The squad surged in. Ramirez's men stormed past her, forcing the man to the ground, binding his hands, dragging him away like prey finally caught. He laughed as they pulled him, laughed like he still owned something she didn't. She turned away, bile burning her throat. Jensen stayed with her, silent, watchful, uncertain if she had just chosen strength or weakness. Hours later, under the harsh lights of the base interrogation room, the man sat chained to steel, eyes glinting with secrets. And she stood outside the glass, watching. Ramirez muttered, "We'll break him." She doubted that. Some men never broke. But she had. Not in front of them, not in the way they'd notice. But inside, something had cracked open. The silence she had carried so long was bleeding out. And she didn't know if she could ever cage it again. That night, alone in her quarters, She unfolded the letter. Her brother's handwriting faded, smudged by time and tears. She traced the words with trembling fingers. "Don't let them win." She closed her eyes. But for the first time, she wasn't sure if letting them win meant killing her enemy, or keeping herself from becoming him. The interrogation room was a cage of echoes. Metal scraped on metal. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing everything in sterile white. The air reeked of sweat, blood, and stale cigarettes. On the other side of the glass she stood rigid, watching, listening. The man they had hunted for months sat chained to the table. His wrists bore angry red grooves from the cuffs. His limp had worsened, but his grin, untouched, defiant, remained. Ramirez leaned in close, knuckles flat on the table. His voice was calm, steady. "Names, roots, cells, you talk, you live." The man chuckled. His teeth were stained, his eyes burned. "You think I care about living?" The colonel's jaw flexed. Hours passed, they pressed. He resisted. Each question met with silence, mockery, or a cold story that chilled the room. And she didn't move, didn't blink. Her body was still, but inside she was unraveling thread by thread. Because every time he opened his mouth, every time that voice filled the air, she was back in the fire, back in the field, back to the night her brother's hand slipped from hers. When the others left the room, exhausted, she stayed behind the glass. Alone, staring. The man turned his head slowly, as though he could feel her eyes on him. And then he smiled. Right at her. She stiffened. He mouthed a single word through the glass. "Girl." Her blood froze. He remembered. That night she didn't sleep. She sat on her cot, gear untouched, rifle leaned against the wall. Her fingers traced the letter again and again, until the paper threatened to tear. Don't let them win. But what if they already had? Her silence used to be armor. Now it felt like chains. She couldn't eat, couldn't breathe without tasting ashes, couldn't hear without hearing his laugh. The weight was suffocating. Jensen found her before dawn. He hovered in the doorway, hesitant. "You didn't go to mess." She didn't answer. He stepped inside, voice low. "You need to eat, need to sleep. If you don't." Her eyes snapped to him, sharp. "If I don't, what? You'll tell them that I'm slipping." He faltered. The words on his tongue seemed to crumble. Finally he said, "I saw your hands shaking." Her chest tightened. She hid her fists in her lap. Jensen's gaze softened. "You don't have to carry it alone." Her throat closed. But she couldn't speak, couldn't let the words escape, because once they were out, they could never be taken back. So she turned away, silence wrapping her like a shroud. Jensen lingered, then left. And she hated herself for wanting him to stay. The next day, Ramirez ordered another session. This time he wanted results. They brought her in. Not behind glass, inside the room. The man looked up when she entered. His grin widened. Ramirez motioned for her to sit across the table. "Sometimes," he muttered, "the right face breaks the wall." She froze. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Ramirez leaned close to her ear. "You knew him, didn't you?" Her breath caught. But before she could answer, the colonel was gone, leaving her alone with the ghost made flesh. The man leaned back, chains rattling. So the little girl grew up. Her hands clenched on the table. He studied her like prey. You've got his eyes, same fire, same stupid belief that courage means something. Her teeth ground together. He chuckled. "I remember how he screamed, how the fire swallowed him, and you," he tilted his head, "you ran." Her chest ripped open. Memories clawed their way out, jagged and merciless. "I didn't run," she whispered. He smirked. "No, you crawled." Her fist slammed the table. The sound cracked the silence. But she didn't break, not yet. Hours stretched. She asked questions. He answered with riddles, taunts, half-truths. but in the spaces between, he bled pieces of himself. A location, a contact, a shipment. Ramirez got what he wanted, but she got nothing that mattered. Because no intel could resurrect the dead, no secret could rewrite the night she lost her brother. When they finally dragged him back to his cell, she sat alone in the interrogation room, shaking. Her reflection in the steel table stared back at her, hollow eyes, chapped lips, a face carved by silence. And she realized something she hadn't before. The war wasn't just outside. It was inside. And she was losing. Days blurred, missions ran, intel unraveled cells across borders. Ramirez was pleased. But with every new piece of ground they gained, she felt herself slipping further into the dark. The squad laughed without her, ate without her, slept while she stared at ceilings. And Jensen, he kept watching. Not with suspicion, not with judgment, but with something heavier. Something like fear. Then came the night she cracked. The base was quiet, generators humming, rain pelting the tin roofs. She wandered to the holding block, drawn like a moth to flame. The guards let her pass, her clearance unquestioned. And there he was. Behind bars, shackled, yet still smiling. "You couldn't stay away," he murmured. She gripped the bars, knuckles white. "Why me, why him?" He leaned forward, chains clinking. "Because war doesn't choose, it devours." Her breath hitched. He whispered, "You carry him in your silence, but silence rots. It'll eat you alive." Tears burned her eyes. For the first time, she let them fall. She turned and fled before the guards could see. That night, she dreamed of fire again. Her brother's hand slipping, his voice shouting her name. And over it all, laughter. His laughter. She woke gasping, sweat drenching her sheets. The letter lay crumpled in her fist. The words blurred, unreadable. For the first time, she wanted to scream. But she didn't. She couldn't. Because silence was all she had left. The desert night was colder than the day deserved. Wind carried the sting of sand, whispering against fabric, rattling through empty canteens. Out there in the dunes, shapes blurred into shadows and shadows into ghosts. She crouched in the dust, rifle steady, eyes fixed through the scope. A convoy crawled along the horizon. Headlights cut faint beams in the dark, too far for recognition, but close enough to feel the vibration in the earth. Her breathing slowed. Her finger hovered. And for the first time in weeks, she felt still. But then her hand shook. The image swam. Her brother's voice, sharp in memory, echoed, "Don't let them win." She blinked, vision clearing. The radio hissed in her ear. "Ramirez, hold fire, wait for the lead truck." She hesitated. Because in that moment, through glass and distance, she thought she saw him. Not Ramirez, not Jensen. Him. The prisoner. His face, his grin. Sitting in the passenger seat of the convoy. Her pulse spiked. Her silence cracked into a gasp. But she said nothing. The convoy slowed, then scattered, then the desert erupted. Gunfire, shouts, explosions painting the dunes with fire. She squeezed the trigger, once, twice. Figures dropped, but she didn't feel victory. She felt emptiness. And when the dust cleared, the man she thought she saw wasn't there. Because of course he was. He was locked behind bars. And yet his laugh still echoed in her head. Back at base, Ramirez slammed a map on the table. "We hit them hard, took out supply lines. Intel says cells are collapsing." Cheers erupted, slaps on backs. But she sat in silence, eyes down. Because her hands still trembled. Because in the flames, she swore she saw her brother's hand reaching for hers again. And she hadn't reached back. Later, Jensen found her outside, under the stars. He stood beside her quietly. The night hummed with generators and far-off dogs barking. "You're not here," he said softly. She frowned. "What?" "Your body here, but you," he gestured at the empty air. "You're somewhere else, somewhere you can't leave." Her jaw tightened. He sighed. "One day you'll have to tell someone." She turned, eyes blazing. "And what good would that do?" He didn't answer, just let the silence stretch. Finally he whispered, "It might save you." Then he walked away. And she hated that his words lingered more than the colonel's orders ever did. The next mission came fast, too fast. Insertion at dawn. Objective: secure a safe house, capture a courier. Simple, clean. It was. The door blew inward, fire met fire. Shouts, splinters, blood. Her squad moved like ghosts, precision cutting through chaos. But she faltered. Every face she saw was his, every cry was her brother, every shadow carried fire. She fought, yes, but she fought blind. By the time it was over, the courier lay dead. Intel burned with him. Ramirez's rage filled the comms. "That was our lead. Do you understand what you've cost us?" Her chest caved under the weight of silence. She wanted to scream, "It's not my fault." But her lips stayed sealed. When they returned, the squad avoided her eyes. Only Jensen looked. Not with anger, not with pity. With something worse. Disappointment. That night she sat alone in the barracks, staring at the letter. Her brother's words had always been a compass. Now they felt like a curse. Don't let them win. But hadn't she already lost? Sleep wouldn't come. So she went to the holding block again. The guards hesitated, but she flashed clearance. And once more she stood before him. The prisoner grinned, chains clinking. "Back so soon?" Her voice cracked for the first time. "Why won't you stop haunting me?" He leaned forward. "Because you let me in." Her breath stuttered. He chuckled. "You think silence keeps you safe. It doesn't, it just feeds me." Tears burned her eyes. "What do you want?" His smile was ice. "I already have it." She stumbled back, chest heaving. The guard called her name. She forced herself to leave. For the first time, she wondered if the war inside her was more dangerous than the one outside. In the days that followed, she withdrew further. The squad's laughter sounded distant. Ramirez's briefings blurred into static. Only Jensen's eyes cut through. Always watching, always waiting. And she hated that part of her wanted to break her silence, just to see if his expression would change. The next mission loomed. Rumors spread, bigger target, higher stakes. Some said it would end the cell, others whispered it was suicide. And she felt nothing. No fear, no fire. Just the weight of silence pressing her deeper into the dark. But in that silence a thought stirred. What if this next mission was her chance? Not for victory. Not for closure. But for release. The storm rolled in without warning. Thunder cracked over the desert, jagged lightning splitting the horizon. The air smelled of ozone and dust. It rattled the tin roofs of the outpost, drummed against helmets stacked by the door, seeped into bones already worn from too many sleepless nights. She sat alone in the hangar, boots on cold concrete, her rifle laid across her knees like a confession waiting to be spoken. Outside, the squad was restless, gearing up, checking ammo, trading dark jokes to mask the fear crawling under their skin. Because the next mission wasn't rumor anymore. It was real. It was here. And it was going to break someone. The colonel's voice had been blunt. "This is it. High-value target, final strike. We end them or they regroup. We win or they rise again." But his words barely touched her. Because all she heard was the echo of a prisoner's grin. All she saw was her brother's hand slipping from hers. And all she carried was silence. Jensen found her there, just as he always did, like he was tethered to the part of her that refused to drown. "You're doing it again," he said. Her eyes lifted slowly. Rain streaked across the hangar's skylight, each drop a sharp tap in the silence between them. "Doing what?" she asked, though her voice was hollow, empty. "Building walls so high no one can climb them." She smirked without humor. "Maybe that's the point." Jensen studied her face. He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he sat beside her, elbows on knees. The silence stretched. Finally, he whispered, "What happened to you out there? It's not just about them, is it?" Her throat closed. Her hand tightened on the rifle until her knuckles whitened. And then, before she could stop herself, she spoke. "I had a brother." The words fell heavy, foreign, as though she hadn't said them out loud in years. Jensen didn't flinch, didn't push, he waited. Her chest ached. "We were trapped, fire everywhere. I held on, but I couldn't pull him through." Her eyes burned. Her voice cracked. "I promised him. I promised I wouldn't let them win." And then the silence broke with the sound of her own sob. Small, sharp "ruh." Jensen placed a hand over hers. Warm, steady, real. "You kept him alive," he murmured. "In here," he tapped his chest. "That's why you're still fighting." Her tears fell. She hated them, but she let them fall anyway. For the first time, she wasn't silent. But the mission didn't wait for her grief. Dawn came. The storm passed, leaving mud and stillness in its wake. The squad loaded into the convoy. Engines roared, metal clanged, boots stomped. She sat in the corner, helmet low, heart pounding. Ramirez barked orders, eyes sharp. He didn't notice the shift in her, but Jensen did. For the first time in months, she looked back at him and didn't look away. The ride was long, the road rough. Every bump jolted their gear, every shadow stretched into something threatening. The safe house loomed ahead, an old stone compound clinging to the side of a ridge. Intel said the target was inside. Reality said nothing was certain. The assault was sudden, brutal. Gunfire tore through the air, shouts ricocheted off stone. She moved with precision, training carrying her even as fear gnawed at her chest. But something was different. Every time she squeezed the trigger, she didn't see his grin. She saw her brother's eyes. And for once, that memory didn't cripple her. It steadied her. The squad breached the inner hall. Dusk clouded the air, thick with plaster and cordite. Then they found him. The target. Not just a courier, not just a soldier. The architect, the voice behind the network. And in that split second she froze. Because the man turned, and the light hit his face. It was him. The prisoner. Her blood ran cold. But it couldn't be. He was behind bars, locked, shackled, watched. And yet here he stood. Smiling. Her rifle wavered. Jensen shouted, "Take the shot." Her hands shook. The room spun. Her brother's scream filled her head. The letter's words cut through, "Don't let them win." And for the first time she understood. Silence wasn't strength. Silence wasn't armor. It was surrender. She squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked like thunder. The man fell. Silence followed, heavy and final. Her chest heaved, her eyes blurred. Jensen gripped her shoulder, grounding her. "You did it," he whispered. But she didn't feel triumph. She felt something else. Release. When the compound was secure, when the squad regrouped, Ramirez counted the victory. Numbers, weapons seized, enemies down. But she sat apart, helmet in her lap, rain dripping through the broken roof. She thought of her brother. Of fire. Of promises. And for the first time, she whispered into the stillness, "I didn't let them win." Her voice cracked, but it was hers. The compound was quiet now. Too quiet. Smoke curled from shattered windows. Spent casings glittered on the floor like fragments of a broken promise. The storm outside had passed. leaving the air heavy with the smell of gunpowder, stone dust, and blood. She stood in the rubble, helmet under her arm, staring at the body. The man's grin was gone. For months it had haunted her, through dreams, through silence, through every mission that cut her soul raw. But now all that remained was a lifeless face, slack and ordinary. She felt nothing. No triumph, no vengeance. Just the heavy emptiness of survival. The squad worked around her, voices muffled, movements sharp. Jensen barked orders, guiding men to clear rooms, gather intel, secure the perimeter. Ramirez's voice thundered over comms. Target neutralized. Repeat, target neutralized. The line erupted with cheers. But her ears rang with silence. Jensen approached slowly, helmet tucked under his arm, dirt streaked across his cheek. His eyes searched hers. "You all right?" he asked softly. She opened her mouth. No words came. Not yet. But for the first time, her silence wasn't weakness. It was choice. They moved out at dawn. The sun rose blood-red over the ridge, painting long shadows across the sand. The convoy rolled slow, battered from battle, yet carrying the weight of victory. Inside the truck, the squad dozed against their gear. Exhaustion softened their faces, made them look almost young again. She sat near the back, rifle propped against her leg, letter in hand. The edges were torn now. The ink faded from too much folding, too much clutching in fists that trembled when the world closed in. But the words were still there. Don't let them win. And for the first time, she didn't read it as a burden. She read it as a promise kept. Back at base, Ramirez gathered the unit. His speech was sharp, practiced, full of metrics and glory. High-value target eliminated. Network disrupted. You've struck a blow they'll never forget. Applause, cheers, relief. But she didn't clap. She stood in the back, shadows hiding her eyes, hands tight on the folded letter. Because for her, victory wasn't in numbers. It was in finding her voice again. That night the squad celebrated. Laughter spilled from the mess hall, clashing with clinks of bottles, boots stomping in rhythm, voices shouting to drown the memories. She didn't join them. Instead, she slipped outside, into the cool night air. The stars stretched endless above, quiet and unbroken. And in that silence she finally spoke. Not to Jensen, not to Ramirez, not to anyone alive. But to her brother. I carried you every step, every breath, and tonight I let you go. Her voice cracked. Her tears fell freely, glistening in the starlight. But this time she didn't fight them. This time she let herself grieve. Jensen found her there, as always. He didn't say a word, didn't try to fix what couldn't be fixed. He just stood beside her, shoulder brushing hers, eyes lifted to the same sky. And in that quiet she realized something. She wasn't alone anymore. Weeks passed. Missions shifted, orders changed. The war didn't end, it never did. But something inside her had. The silence was still there, yes. But it wasn't a cage anymore. It was a choice. Sometimes she spoke. To Jensen, to the squad, to herself. Other times, she let silence carry the weight words could never hold. One evening, she returned to the holding block. The cell was empty. Chains hung slack. The prisoner was gone, transferred, executed, erased by the machine of war. For a long time, she stood staring at the empty space where he had once sat grinning. And for the first time, the absence didn't choke her. It freed her. Later in her quarters, she unfolded the letter again. The paper was fragile, barely holding together. She read the words aloud, steady, clear. Don't let them win. Then she folded it one last time, slipped it into her journal, and closed the cover. Not to forget, but to carry differently. The next morning, as the squad prepped for another mission, Ramirez's voice boomed as usual. But she wasn't listening. She was watching Jensen laugh with one of the rookies, watching the way the sun cut across the tarmac, painting long golden lines over worn boots and tired faces. And she felt not joy, not peace. Something quieter, something closer to dignity. The convoy rolled out, engines roared, dust rose. She sat in the back, helmet under her arm, eyes on the horizon. The war stretched ahead, endless, unforgiving. But she was ready, not because she had healed, but because she had learned how to carry the wound. And maybe that was the point. The camera lingers on her face. A quiet strength, a resilience unspoken. And as the screen fades to black, the words echo like a whisper. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Silence, then nothing.